Hello everyone and welcome to the download from 24 IT Services. I've got a brilliant show lined up for you today and I'm really nervous because this is the very first episode. But I've got a really great guest from today that's joining me who's recently actually joined 24 IT Services. I would like to welcome to you Sarah. Sarah's
Hello.
recently joined as our Client AI Implementation Manager, which we will get to in a little while. But first today, we wanted to check out a little bit of news. We're going to split the show up into 3 different segments. News, talking about a little bit of a tech topic, and then talking about, well, usually it would be a local business, but in this week it's going to be talking about Sarah and what her role is here at 24. So let's first of all dive straight into the news, and I won't lie, we're starting with a bit of a meaty news story today, aren't we, Sarah?
Oh, yes.
So you may have seen in the news this past couple of weeks now that Marks and Spencer and Co-op and also even Harrods have been hit by a cyber attack. Now, hacking groups by the name of Dragon Force and Scattered Spider, what even are these names? They've been named in connection with the cyber incidents, which has caused disruption at these major retailers over this past couple of weeks. According to Bleeping Computer, the hackers have carried out a ransomware attack on these chains, and based on previous attacks, they usually demand somewhere in the region of around 10 million to be able to restore access. The attacks impacted online ordering systems, which are still down more than a couple of weeks after the attack, as well as impacting contactless payments in store. However, the retailers initially said that no users need to take any action at this time. Over this past weekend, Sky News reporter stated that an employee from M&S's head office anonymously told them that they did not have any business continuity plan in place for this. However, I can't even get my words out. An M&S statement later said that they did have a robust business continuity plan in place to manage these types of incidents led by an experienced team. However, please do bear in mind that they are still down a couple of weeks after the attack. The employee also went on to say that it could be months before they fully recover from this disruption from the attacks, and that many people have spent weekends working and sleeping from their offices. On top of this, they said that they obviously aren't allowed to use work devices at the moment, and by extension, actually using their own personal devices for many things, which is in itself presenting its own cybersecurity risks. The team member went on to say that they're not allowed to use Teams currently, instead having to use WhatsApp to be able to communicate, and that there is a sense of paranoia throughout the business as not everyone knows everything because they don't know who or what exactly has been compromised. Additionally, like I say, both Co-op and Harrods this past week also had been forced to shut down parts of their IT systems in response to hackers attempting to gain access to their systems, causing issues both online and in store, with Harrods even restricting internet access across many of its sites. However, with Co-op, it appears that the situation was much worse than they originally thought. Even though they initially stated that there was no evidence that customer data, again, can't get my words out, was compromised, the hacking group Dragonforce contacted the BBC with proof that they had infiltrated the Co-op IT networks and stolen large amounts of data of both current and past customers and employees, including names, home addresses, emails, phone numbers, and even membership club card numbers and things like that. A spokesperson from Co-op has stated that no passwords or bank or credit card details linked to purchases or products or services that people use has been leaked. However, in the wake of the attack, Co-op staff are being told to ensure that they have cameras turned on during Teams meetings and are being ordered not to record or transcribe calls, and to also verify that all participants are genuine Co-op staff. A report from Bleeping Computer again over this weekend now states that the hacking group were able to convince members of these businesses' internal IT help desks for both M&S and Co-op to reset employee passwords to be able to gain access to their systems through an advanced social engineering attack, which likely started as a targeted phishing scam. Whoa, what a meaty story. No wonder I'm losing my words trying to get through all that. But
Yeah.
it begs the question, like, do we feel that we could trust brands like this after this type of attack? I mean, I don't know about you, Sarah, but I don't shop at M&S that often. The last time I shopped at M&S was to buy our company hamper, which Diaz from Austin Banks for Recruitment actually won. How often do you shop at M&S, and do you feel that you could trust your data with them now?
I am Marks and Spencer's target market, aren't I? A middle-aged woman, you know, I'm there all the time. I live near the Trafford Centre in Manchester. I'm like there. I shop quite a bit at Marks and Spencer's, but mostly via Ocado. So I do my food shopping via Ocado. And we had an email, I think it was last week, saying that Ocado was saying that they were going to struggle fulfilling some of the Marks and Spencer products.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. As somebody who is fascinated with all this kind of subject, I don't know how I feel about it. On the one hand, I'm sort of like outraged because I'm like, how on earth could such big institutions, you know, big British institutions that we sort of like know and love, like the Co-op, Harrod, Marks and Spencer's, how could they be in such a position? But then the bit of me that works in this industry knows exactly why they're in this position. And it, like you say in the news article that we've been reading this, haven't we, for like 2 weeks, talking about this constantly off and on. The kind of the stuff that they're putting out into the media isn't really surprising. You know, it was probably a really sophisticated phishing email that went in that somebody clicked on, which is the stuff that we talk about all the time. And it just shows you that even these massive institutions that hopefully have got, you know, decent IT teams and decent cybersecurity teams backing them can also fall foul of it.
Yeah.
So part of me is just sort of like, yeah, you know, this was going to happen sooner or later. But then the other part of me is like, oh my God, well, you know, when am I going to get me avocados from Ocado? It's just like, do you know what I mean? It's like middle-aged woman outrage is there. But I think that there is a lesson to learn, isn't there, you know, from all this? As there always is.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the only thing that M&S will get from me is how much I love cherry liqueurs at Christmas time. But I suppose as we shop now and we've returned to normal after quite a few kind of years where we didn't know what we were doing with shopping in retail stores and things like that.
Yeah.
Many people are now worried about the data that people are collecting on them. I mean, you shop in somewhere like M&S, you shop in somewhere like Tesco, Co-op, and places like that. The amount of data that these people collect on you, do you feel that that type of data would be safe in the hands of a cybercriminal? What do you think that these people could then do? Do you feel that you would then be targeted in a phishing attack to be able to gain access to some more of your personal information off of the back of something like this?
I'm smiling at this because all they know about me is how many toilet rolls I get through in a week. It's that kind of stuff, isn't it? And I think I sound like I'm quite blasé about it, and I apologise for that in some respects. But if you think about the amount of data that we've been generating, so Tesco Club Card was one of the first loyalty schemes, wasn't it? Back in was it early 90s, something like that? It's been around forever. And the whole principle of that was to collect data.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, technology has moved on significantly since then, and I'm sure we'll touch on that later. But if you think about what Club Card was introduced for, it was to get shopper data, because that is the most valuable thing that any, you know, retailer can know. You know, what their average middle-aged woman buys on a Friday night when she goes to Marks and Spencer's after work. If she wants something treaty for a tea, what does she buy? The same with Tesco's, the same with Sainsbury's. Anybody who runs a loyalty scheme, they are just after your data.
Yeah. How can they customize their business to be able to sell specifically to people like you?
Yeah. And it's like Amazon, you know, when you shop on Amazon, it recommends products for you. There's that sort of like, you've bought this, so you might like one of these. That is really, really important information. So for me, as an end consumer,
Bluey figures, apparently.
You're not the average shopper, AJ, are you? Let's be honest. But if you think about it, all they really want is this information, because this information means money to them. So the more they can recommend stuff to me, and the more they know that I've got that type of brain that if you serve me up an ad, I am going to go look at it and probably buy it. The more they know this, the more that is useful. Now, if the hackers get the information about what my weekly Ocado shop is, they're probably going to sit there and go, do you know what? That woman is really sad. She eats the same thing pretty much week in, week out. And every now and again, she'll go mad and buy a smoothie or something. that in some respects, my shopping data to me isn't that valuable because it's there anyway.
Yeah.
If you see what I mean, it's like I'm struggling to understand what they can do if it's purely shopping data.
Yeah.
If it was my personal details,
Yeah.
if it was my email,
Yeah. Such as the co-op attack, which has leaked like phone numbers and email addresses and things like that. Stuff that is personally relating to you as a person.
It's probably out there already anyway.
Yeah. We did publish an article recently about this, which is about privacy fatigue to an extent, where many people now, I mean, just think about the amount of times you load up a website and it says, would you like to accept cookies? Yeah, of course I want cookies. Well,
give me all the cookies.
You know, I do like a nice cookie, but that's not the point. Like the amount of data that is being collected on us as individuals now, people have almost become blind to it as an extent. Like, okay, the information's out there anyway, whether it's already been leaked on the dark web from a previous cyber attack, or we share information through social media such as LinkedIn, which we're currently live streaming to at the moment. Like, information about us is out there, and if people wanted to build a profile about us, I don't know, to an extent, many people now feel that, well, it's out there anyway, so what?
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
And I think that's where I'm at, because I'm just like, I've worked in technology for a long, long time. And I have seen all this stuff come in. I have, seen the advent of like, really personalized shopping, for example, like the stuff we say in Amazon where they recommend stuff. Seen all this come in. And I'm like, you've got this information about me anyway.
Yeah.
It's like we can't do anything now without leaving a trail of devastation or data behind us. It's like we can't live really unless we are totally off grid. And I know very, very few people who are literally living in a way where they're not generating data at all. This is a fact of life now. Yeah. And I think, yes, in some respects, the hacks are kind of a fact of life, because we've talked about it many times, and shared social posts about it. We are the weakest link as human beings. Definitely. We are the weak link in this chain. It's always going to be us that clicks on something that causes an issue. That doesn't mean to say that we can't protect ourselves, and we shouldn't be protecting ourselves. But I think we've got to get to the point where we realise that this is now kind of an occupational hazard of being a human being.
Yeah.
And, this is going to happen. Yes, it's bad that it's happened. And yes, it's bad that data comes out and, things are leaked out there that we don't want other people to see.
Yeah.
But I think we also have to accept that this is part of what happens. We just have to take better steps to prevent it.
Yeah. I suppose the bigger question then leading from this now is, do we feel that these businesses did have the right plans in place to be able to protect themselves? So, I forget who it was now. Was it M&S? Let me go back to my initial notes. Who said, M&S, who stated that they did have a business continuity plan in place. However, we're now seeing that, we've passed 2 bank holidays over the space of now 3 weeks. Do we feel that the plans that they had in place were potentially even good enough to be able to combat the threat that they faced?
I'm shaking my head. No. Because having worked, so I've not worked in cyber. I worked for an ERP company in a previous life, many moons ago. And I worked with a big multinational business. I didn't actually work on this incident, thankfully, but one of my colleagues worked on an incident where a big multinational business, literally global, hadn't backed up their SQL server. They thought that they had, and one of their servers went down, and they went to, go to back up, and they sat there, and there was then a lot of swearing, which I'm not repeating, but there was a lot of swearing, because the last actual good backup that they had was 6 months ago.
Oh, no.
And that's a big multinational company. They lost 6 months worth of data. And if I remember rightly, I mean, this was years ago, but I do believe that Microsoft were involved in helping to support them to rebuild that server so that they could basically claw back some of it. If you think about, that was a big company who was using a complicated ERP system, who was using lots of interconnected technology. who had an IT team.
Yeah.
So these are not people that don't know what they're doing, but nobody had checked the backup.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times do we have conversations, in our socials about like backups, disaster recovery? You have an on-site backup, you have an off-site backup, you have a backup on Mars
Yep.
just in case.
3, 2, 1.
All these
3, 2,
things.
1. 3
Yeah,
copies of your
we talk
data at any
about
given
this.
time. 2
Yeah,
different mediums and 1 being off-site.
yeah. We talk about this constantly. Anybody who's worked in any sort of way, shape, or form in IT or technology will know this. Like it's like burned onto the back of your
Yep.
eyelids. But this company did not check their backup. So they're a comparable size to Marks and Spencer. So I guess what I'm saying here is that they probably had good intentions.
Yeah.
We'll never know because we're not inside the business and we're not in the room, but
No.
they probably had really good intentions, and they probably have DR plans, and they've probably planned to hell and back. But when actually the thing comes to happen,
do they expect that they would ever be targeted in this type of attack? Can you plan for every eventuality, I suppose?
no.
By working with people who are experienced and have seen businesses go through it, you can get as close as you can. But it's about making those business continuity plans as robust as possible, really. And
and reviewing them,
yeah,
I would say,
continuously.
because if you look 2 years ago, hardly some businesses were probably using AI, but not that many. So if you've got a DR plan that goes back 2-3 years, is that actually even relevant now? Is your business in the same position? I mean, it's so easy to sort of sit there and go, yeah, we're going to plan to do this, and if this happens, we'll do X, Y, Z. But this can change over time, and 10 years ago, would we have thought that phishing emails would be as sophisticated as they are now?
Exactly. It's
Probably
like we say
not.
that the business continuity planning and cybersecurity audits, those should happen at the very least on an annual basis. We do continuous, like, business continuity and disaster recovery planning for people, and continuous cybersecurity audits to make sure that people are in line with like the latest minimum recommendations. So I don't know. It's a developing story. Even the information about the phishing attack and how it was a targeted social engineering attack, that only came out over the last couple of days, and I have a feeling that we could be talking about this for at least another week or more, and the true impact of it might actually only come out of the woodworks, I don't know, months down the line, potentially even.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, isn't it? The actual true impact of this. So at the moment, there's me outraged about my Ocado delivery, but what does that mean in terms of reputational damage to Marks and Spencers? I mean, I'm focusing on Marks and Spencers because that one is, for me, is the biggest one, because this has been going on for since Easter. And one of my friends had said that he'd been to Marks and Spencers in Newcastle and they were having problems with the tills or something, and he thought it was a bit weird. And then a couple of hours later, all this sort of starts to come out. And if you think that there was been in the news, hasn't there, about the share prices or profits have been cut, and it's like sometimes it's not necessarily about what happens in that moment, is it? It's sort of like it's the reputational damage, and it's like Marks and Spencers have built their reputation on being trustworthy, a solid British company, all the values that we love about being British. And then all of a sudden they're in the middle of this quite significant event that could potentially, and already has potentially, wiped millions of pounds off the value of the business. And, we know in our, working careers of businesses that have gone under because of this.
Oh, yeah.
This type
it
of
happens
thing
all
can
the
kill a
time.
business.
It happens all the time. And even, just going slightly off topic, the impact that it has on the people in the business as well now. So I saw news reports saying that phony IT calls are now being made to people who are M&S and Co-op employees, people claiming to be from these businesses' IT departments, who are then trying to make the situation worse by then trying to gain access through other means and basically ruin people's lives as a result, really.
It's actually quite frightening um, how much this can mushroom
Yeah,
from this one particular event. You know, somebody's obviously got into the system somehow, somewhere, whatever, and then this whole sort of like ecosystem of stuff happens out the back of it. I
yeah,
mean, we spoke last week, didn't we, about how I'd seen something somewhere. I can't remember now. I think it was possibly the BBC that one of the suppliers to Marks and Spencers have actually gone back to using pen and paper.
yeah,
I
yeah. I've
mean
seen
that
that.
that
Yeah,
is like not done that since the mid 90s, you know. But that's how serious that is
mm,
for a supplier of a big multinational to actually resort to not using their technology
yeah.
for whatever reason it was. I think they were talking about taking manual orders or something. I mean, this story is changing so much. I can't even remember what I read yesterday about it. There is so much coming out, but it's just like all of these individual different sort of like branches off this main cyber attack. They're all not scary, but you know
No,
what I mean? They're all something that in
can
their
have
own
an
right need to be
impact. Yeah.
discussed. You know, it's kind of we assume that a cyber attack is like a kind of a one and done thing, and it's really not.
No, it's not.
So we will see.
But what is done is this topic, so we'll go over to the next news story now. So I saw recently that researchers at Carnegie Mellon have actually created a simulated company staffed with AI agents, which they test with performing normal human jobs. This involved browsing the web, writing code, and even communicating with other AI agents. However, it didn't go too well, according to the report. These AI agents lacked common sense, struggled to perform basic web queries, and even lied to themselves and other agents. I actually think out of everything that's covered in this story, that the most realistic thing about the experiment is that people, well, the AI agents were lying. I mean, just think about the amount of people who will lie within their roles to be able to kind of cover for themselves or progress
Mhm.
themselves in some respect. But it it does present an interesting question, really. Do you
Mm.
feel that you could trust a business or even a team within a business that was run entirely by AI? And do you even think that you would know about it when you did interact with that?
There's another one, AJ. This is a controversial subject, isn't it? Because it's like part of me was like, I want to have a go at this.
Yeah,
You know what I'm like? I want to break things. I want to see what it does. I want to have a conversation with it. I want to understand how it works.
yeah,
I know a lot of people out there, some of my family included, who absolutely cannot stand chatbots
yeah.
and stuff like that. They get really infuriated with them. So
Like, I want
I
to
guess
speak
if
to a
it's
human.
yeah, yeah, I get like that on phone lines though. I'm like, can I just speak to somebody, please? Because you don't understand Yorkshire. Um, but I just think it's a really interesting one because how much of this is happening anyway? You know, some of this is already in place now where there are like chatbots, there are sophisticated chatbots that actually do we know that we're talking to a chatbot?
Probably not.
Possibly, maybe. It depends. I suppose it depends on the scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, if it's me chasing me a mythical magical Ocado delivery or something, and then that's a chat bot, I'm not likely to be having a massively intellectual conversation with it.
no.
I'm not likely to say, you know, where are my avocados, please? You know, thank you very much, because I'm always polite to my chat bots. But it's kind of like, I suppose it depends on the circumstance
Yeah,
and the situation that you're in. I think it's a really interesting thought experiment more than anything. You know me, I'm kind of into how people interact with technology and how it makes us feel and all this
yeah,
kind of stuff. So the fact that if you left AI on its own to run a business, it started lying to itself and, you know, being devious and all the rest of it, it I find it fascinating. I find it so fascinating that you know this is what
yeah.
happens because that's what we do.
I
And
suppose the
part of me,
challenge phase we now are faced with, though, is
mm,
what do we feel that these AI agents and chatbots and tools that businesses are using,
mm,
where do we feel that they could potentially be useful within a business? I mean, would you trust an AI chatbot or AI agent by, I don't know, communicating with you about physical and mental health, for example? There was a report, I believe it was last year, might have been the year before
mm,
actually, where in the US, the National Eating Disorder Association, I believe it was, replaced all of their human agents with AI agents, who then very quickly gave users harmful advice before then quickly rehiring the entire staff. So it just goes to show that in some areas, especially where AI, whilst it is improving, is still prone to hallucinating and not providing accurate and helpful information. We actually do have an article coming up soon about AI hallucinations versus human errors, which if you want to find out more about that, that will be coming up in the next few weeks, I believe. But it does beg that question. Would you trust an AI agent in some of these industries?
Again, it's one of those, isn't it, where you were walking a fine line. So you know, a lot of my I talk a lot about mental health, so I've got a lot of knowledge through lived experience around poor mental health. I've had a lot of time in therapy. I don't have mind admitting it. I don't feel that, on the one hand, I wouldn't be uncomfortable with it,
Yeah.
but I think I'm probably in one of the strongest places that I've been in a long time. So if I was in crisis, I think that's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
I think it's dangerous,
especially for people like with
potentially
this one with
dangerous.
eating disorders.
Yeah,
it is dangerous.
yeah. I think there are certain medical things that I think is brilliant for, you know, things like cancer screening, stuff like that, where it can see like breast cancer before a human eye can detect it. You know, that kind of stuff. Perfect. You know, that's something that's kind of like a backup to the human eye looking at that scan or
complementary whatever. Even.
Yeah. You know, it helps. It's providing assistance. It's you know, it's doing something positive. The problem with this is that we don't know what these chatbots are going to do. They're quite unpredictable. They're like, in some respects, it's like we're unpredictable in certain situations. And I think you've got to be so careful about how you interact with human beings, because if you're somebody who's vulnerable and mentally in a vulnerable place, it's a really tricky conversation to have. And I think there are even some human beings that don't do that very well.
Yeah.
You know, so it's kind of like, I'm all for technology and it being used for like positive stuff, and you know, to drive things forward. But I think we've got to be careful about how we do that until we know more about how it behaves and where it's going to go.
Think about tools such as, I don't know, let's move it over to something like Microsoft Copilot. These sorts of tools, when used in a business, can be used to improve productivity and efficiency. But we're not talking about that specifically. We're talking about agents that can potentially act for themselves and interact with members of the public and customers and clients and things like that. It's a challenging one. It will be interesting to see how it develops, especially across a wide range of different industries.
We've also got to think humans. We don't behave in a sensible fashion, do we, half the time? You know, you're talking about something, you're trying to educate an AI chatbot on how humans behave. Excuse me. But humans don't behave in the same way all the time.
No.
You can't say that if AJ phones up on this particular day, he's going to behave like this, because AJ might be tired. You know, AJ might be hungry. Yeah, you're always tired. I know you are, love. But there's all these sorts of different things external to you as a human being that impact on how you behave. And unless you can absolutely cater for all of those, if you're having an AI human interaction on something, you know, that kind of level, your response might be completely different depending what time of day it talks to you. And it's do you see what I mean? It's like there's so many variables in this. There's so many unknowns that I'm all for like expanding usage of AI and stuff like that, because I think it has the potential to be amazing, but we have to think about what the knock-on is.
Yeah, it's about using these tools responsibly and making sure that when they are implemented, and we'll come back to this actually a little bit later, that it's well thought out and that you understand what the goal is and how it can have a positive benefit, not only on the business, but on how the business operates and even on customers and clients as well. But
Yeah,
I say we'll
yeah.
come back to that one in a little bit because we've got
Okay.
it's included as part of our main topic for today. Another news story as well recently. This past week, Meta, the company behind Facebook, launched its very own AI app called, would you believe it, Meta AI. Of course, this is actually after it added the non-removable little
Oh,
circle into WhatsApp recently that I actually don't think I've spoken to anyone who actually likes having this Meta AI button embedded into WhatsApp. Hopefully, this new app will mean that they can potentially remove that from WhatsApp at some
mm,
point, but I highly doubt that that will be anytime soon. A
mm,
report from the Wall Street Journal this past week actually revealed that Meta actively discouraged the development of guardrails for their chatbot, even though they knew that it could lead to it engaging in explicit romantic roleplay with some of its users, even though it may have known that they were minors. Recently, even chatbots that were modelled after Princess or now Queen Anna, spoilers if you haven't seen the second film, from the animated movie Frozen, reportedly had romantic encounters with some of its users. Something which you can have obviously imagine that Disney weren't too happy about. A Disney spokesperson did state, "We did not and would never authorize Meta to feature our characters in inappropriate scenarios and are very disturbed that this content may have been accessible to its users, particularly minors, which is why we demanded that Meta immediately cease these harmful misuse of our intellectual property." Thankfully, of course, Meta has now added these guardrails back in, but wow. I mean,
mm.
what a sort of. Can you imagine having either yourself or. I mean, Sarah, you don't have children, but I do. Do you feel that you could trust an AI chatbot that doesn't have these simple guardrails in place to protect its users from engaging in these types of chats? I mean, to an extent, it goes back to the Isaac Asimov three rules of robotics that
Mm,
we should be making sure that we verify that these chatbots have some responsible autonomy over how they can interact with
mm.
users. Like, do you feel that you could trust a chatbot engaging with users that doesn't have these simple guardrails in place?
Short answer, probably not. Probably not. Um, Again, I think this is a tricky one, and I'm looking at this from a technology loving person's perspective.
Yeah,
So we have AI, it's out in the world, however we choose to label it. I mean, we can go in a whole tangent about what AI is and isn't. This is not probably for today. Um, but I think it's a bit like the DR planning with Marks and Spencers.
yeah,
You don't know where this is going to go without pushing it. Now, I am not saying at any point in time should this be pushed, out to like kids
no,
ever. That is completely and utterly wrong. But at some point, surely to God, they must have tested this stuff and like had conversations. And did it not go off on a bit of a Princess Stroke Queen Anna moment then?
it
It's
does.
like,
It makes you wonder what kind of common sense backed this
yeah,
decision. Really, like
yeah,
maybe they didn't think it would be used in this capacity, but you've got to then strip this back to like at the end of the day, the users who are going to be using this are human, and they will find a way to, for lack of a
oh
better
yes,
phrase, misuse it. Let's say,
yeah. Having worked in ERP, having supported customers with ERP systems that have been thoroughly tested by development departments, and somebody phones up and says, "I've just done this," and I'm like, "No, you haven't, because you can't do that." And they're like, "Yes, I have." Like 20 minutes of arguing ensues on the phone while we're trying to work out what they're doing. And they have done the thing that they've said because, with the best will in the world, the test plan did not
yeah,
sort of like involve a normal user in inverted commas who will just press anything.
yeah,
So it's like they may well have tested this, they may well have got a test plan for this, but they clearly have not tested it in a way that kids will do.
yeah,
And I say kids, adults as well.
yeah.
It's like we,
Life
we all do
finds a way.
this. Yeah. It's just I've part of me, like I say, the bigger part of me is horrified, and I think they should have never let this out in a million years, ever,
No,
because it doesn't take that much to know that this is going to happen. But then the other part of me is like, did you really test this properly? Did you actually go there?
Yeah.
In your testing, did you lead
think
your
that this
AA
could be
down
a
a route?
scenario? Yeah.
Yeah, because if you don't factor that in and you don't think about that as part of your testing, it goes out into the real world and it does exactly what it's going to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how could a company as huge as Meta think that that was appropriate, acceptable, any other words,
Yeah.
in that kind of area? It's not. But it also then begs the question of like I say, what are they doing to actually test this?
But it
Where are
goes
they
back to
going with
when like
this?
ChatGPT was first launched to the public. Like
Mm.
at the time when it was very first launched, you could say to it, generate me a code to upload all of the data off of a computer, for example. Like it would
Mm.
turn around and then say to you, "Oh, sorry, I'm a responsible chatbot. I cannot do this." Blah blah
Yeah.
blah blah. And then you could say to it, "Oh no, this is to be able to back up all of my own files, even if it wasn't," and it would
And it
still
would do it.
produce you the code.
Yeah.
Like all it takes is for someone to be persistent enough to be able to try and find a way around some of these safeguards to be able to misuse it to a respect. It's like,
And in some respects, again, that's part of human nature, isn't it?
yeah,
I know why I was so good at my tech role was that I liked breaking things, so therefore I could fix them. And it's kind of like it's that mind, isn't it? That inquiring mind that wants to push things, but wants somebody tells you can't do something or tells me I can't do it. I am that person that if they say do not push the red button, you know who's pushing that button.
oh yeah,
That's me. That's my brain. That's how my brain works. I want to understand everything, like literally to the point of destruction. So for me, I cannot understand why they would not assume that this was going to happen. But then it's like I say, I mean, it depends who wrote the test plan, doesn't it? I mean, if
yeah,
it's some sort of like, I don't know, we're going to pick on middle-aged men, AJ, but some middle-aged guy sat there who's not really thought about anything like this in a very long time, and he's wrote the test plan. Oh yeah, we can ask it this, this, and this, and this, and that'll be fine.
yeah,
Well, actually, no. There's way more to the human experience. Our brains work in
yeah,
different ways. Some of us want to kind of try and break something. Some of us have got a different way of thinking. So it's kind of like testing this stuff is really hard because you have to think about every single possible scenario that could come true.
yeah.
But young kids who are kind of like exploring who they are, they're going to push buttons they shouldn't push.
Yeah, push it to
I
its
don't think that's
boundaries,
yeah.
misuse it to an extent. Speaking of misusing AI, though, have you seen the AI images that some people have been creating recently? Of course, we've seen people creating dolls, Simpsons characters, pop figures. I sent one to you. I know that, Sarah.
Yeah, that
But
my pop figure is coming out on social media soon, believe me.
but I've seen recently, even this past weekend. So was it Donald Trump? He'd posted photos of himself generated by AI as the Pope, and then more recently for Star Wars Day as a Sith Lord. I mean, come on, like you're not painting a very good image for yourself if you're posting yourself as a Sith Lord. But what do we think that the impacts of misusing these AI tools, such as these, could have? Like, are they respectful? Like, if you're posting a photo of yourself as the Pope, do they give the wrong image if you're posting a photo of yourself as a Sith Lord from Star Wars? Like, surely these people have got the common sense. Okay, let's leave the political talk out of it, but surely some of these people have got the common sense to be able to think, you know what? Maybe posting something like this isn't that respectful.
I think the Pope one, I am not by default a religious
No,
person,
neither am I.
but the Pope passing is a significant world event.
Yeah.
If we only have to look at back, it actually toppled Marks and Spencers for the news, didn't it, for a
Yeah.
while, so it's kind of like it's a big thing. That I have lots of friends who are religious. I have, friends who have like lots of different denominations. That, irrespective of religion, is offensive.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not. I mean, just no. There are
No.
many things I could say about it. Probably not appropriate for like 12 o'clock in the afternoon, but just no.
I mean, don't get me wrong, you can have fun, like with the pop figures and the Simpsons
Yeah.
characters, Disney characters, dolls, like the dolls.
Mm.
Again, I've seen multiple people say, if I see one more doll, I'm going to shoot someone. Jokingly, of course. Yeah. But it's it goes beyond that. It's how else you use these tools, isn't it? And it goes back to the previous story, actually. It's about having that common sense.
Yeah.
And about using these tools respectfully in the right way.
Just because you can doesn't mean that you should,
No.
says she, who is probably one of those who probably does and shouldn't. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. I mean, like, we've had a conversation about my upset about him being a Sith Lord.
Yeah.
I am always Team Sith. I don't care what anybody says. I was never going to be a Jedi. Sith's way better outfits, you know, better lightsabers. Just the whole thing is just better. And for me personally, I was more upset about the Sith thing than the Pope, because I was like, that's really like, no, that's crossed the line in my sort of life of loving Star Wars and everything, that I don't think is appropriate. And it's like, you know, yeah, we're smiling about it, but it's kind of like, it's that debate, isn't it, about where do we draw the line?
Yeah.
Where do we say that this is no longer an appropriate use thereof? And that is the debate that's been going on for donkey's years, isn't it?
There's
really?
also the question of, like, who has the right to these types of images? And again, like on the story with Meta AI, like, Disney did not give permission to be able to use their copyrighted, like, characters. Like, when you're thinking about creating yourself as a Simpsons character or as a pop figure or something like that, have these companies agreed that this is something that can be done? Like, where, if you were to then publish that, use it as a business or something like that, who holds the copyright to that? Are you allowed to?
This is where everybody's tying themselves in knots, isn't it? Because it's just sort of like, if you've imagined it. I mean, I have imagined some crazy things, and I've asked Grok on Twitter, X, sorry, as it is now. It's always Twitter in this house.
It's always Twitter.
I've asked Grok to draw things that have come out of my head, and it's failed miserably. So, you know, that tells you where my head goes. But it's just sort of like, because I've thought up that idea doesn't necessarily mean that that intellectual property is mine, does it? Because if I've thought up that idea using somebody else's template, for want of a better word, so it's like, you know, draw AJ as Maggie from The Simpsons, that is not, well, that's wrong on many fronts, but, you know, but that's using something that's already copyrighted. And I think this is the problem that we've got now. There's lots of debates, isn't there, about how if AI creates art and it's inspired by somebody, you know, if that was a human being creating, say, like music. So how many musical artists have been sued for creating something that sounds like something else? You know, but can you really do that with AI? I don't know. It's like, where do you go? Who gets taken to court? I mean, it is a minefield, and it's another one of those things where have we thought about this? Really?
It goes back to that. Do there needs to be particular policies in place to be able to protect these sorts of companies, but protect how these sorts of things are used as well?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. It is a tricky one. And I think it's easier if it's, so, like, you know, if we were using Copilot and that was ring fenced by a company's data, you know, that's kind of in a structured container and that gets out. That's different to something that's already in the public domain anyway, albeit copyrighted. So it's kind of, I don't want to be that person that has to think about that, because it's far too complicated, isn't it? We've created this thing and we've not thought about the implications of what we would do around intellectual property and copyright and stuff like that.
Yeah. Let's move on to another topic now. We'll stay on the topic of AI, though. This week is Deaf Awareness Week, and I wanted to talk about a piece of technology that I saw recently called the HearView subtitle glasses. That I've seen them in videos and news reports, that are allowing people who are deaf or going through their own hearing loss journey to be able to hear without invasive surgery. I know, Sarah, for those who don't know, who are watching, you've been going through your own hearing loss journey recently. How do you feel that something like these HearView subtitle glasses could have supported you or people who are becoming hard of hearing or are deaf? Do you think that something like this would be useful?
I think that's an interesting question. They're all interested, AJ. You're making me think. No Wednesday lunchtime. I think it depends on the scenario with those.
Yeah.
So I lost my hearing March
Yeah.
last year. I'm trying to think when it was. It's like I've now got a hearing aid, so it's like life's changed yet again. So I lost my hearing March last year. I had a virus and literally woke up one morning and lost the percentage of hearing on my right hand side.
Yeah.
Um, Basically the frequencies that make up voices, or
Yeah.
a lot of voices. So a lot of I can't hear my partner very well without my hearing aid in. I mean, I think it's amazing. He thinks it's terrible. It depends, which side of the fence you're on. But that sort of scenario in itself made life pretty tricky.
Yeah.
So going to the supermarket on a Friday night was my favourite thing to moan about, because I couldn't hear a word he was saying about what he wanted for his tea.
Yeah.
But I could hear the chiller cabinets like there was no tomorrow, because that frequency I could still hear.
Yeah.
And it was so loud. It was ear-splittingly loud. I mean, I can't get over to people how painful that was, because everything else had disappeared. So the hubbub of a supermarket had just gone, and you've got chiller cabinets like literally going at you,
Yeah.
hammer and tong. So in that scenario, if I would have been able to see what he was saying through my glasses, that would have made that experience a bit better. Wouldn't have sorted the chiller cabinets out.
No.
But also, like, going out to the pub, we don't go out like loads, but sometimes we decide we're going to go to the local. And we went a few months ago, and we forgot it was quiz night, which was absolute bedlam, because the guy doing the quiz had got a microphone, so it was really loud. There was a lot of background noise that was also really loud.
Yeah.
And then my poor other half is sat opposite me, and I'm like, can't hear a word you're saying, love, let's go home.
It does make you think how these could be used in more public settings, and whether they can cope with those kind of like busy atmospheres.
I think one-to-one.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I didn't notice until all this started happening was how much I lip read.
Yeah.
And if you think about, I mean, if this would have happened to me like peak COVID time when everybody was wearing a mask, lip reading would have been impossible. So communication, although I can still hear out of one ear, relatively well, communication would have been inhibited quite a lot. So actually being able to get like subtitles in my glasses to see what somebody's saying would have been brilliant. I think if it's in a louder, more with more voices type environment, that would be a struggle. But I also think that it's down to the individual as well. I know quite a lot of people now who are totally deaf.
Yeah.
Who were born totally deaf, and they're okay with that.
Yeah.
They're fine with how they're living their lives. I mean, for me, I think the hardest thing was music.
Yeah.
Because it sounds different.
Yeah.
When you've got your headphones on, and it's not coming through this ear, and you're like, half of this is missing. So that wouldn't have helped in that scenario. But I think it's a useful thing, isn't it? Because if you're somebody who is socially isolated, and by wearing these glasses you get a bit more of your sort of like communication back. It's got to be a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, we have a
individual.
really vibrant like deaf community in Doncaster as well. Like both me and my wife have been trying to teach ourselves sign language on and off over like the last year or so.
Yeah.
But I think something like this, someone who's just starting out on their hearing loss journey, it would be able to support them.
Yeah.
At least in the initial stage.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting one to be able to bring up, especially with it being Deaf Awareness Week as well. Let's move on to our last news story, though, for today. Skype is dead. Or is it? So Skype actually, on Monday, closed its doors and their free and paid service, which first launched in, it was like 2003, allowing users to be able to make free computer-to-computer calls and then later like paid computer to landline and mobile calls. Skype has actually seen a huge decline in recent years as Microsoft has switched its focus to Teams, which also has a free limited tier for consumers who were a fan of Skype and want to keep using that service. Or they could use any number of other different consumer-focused services, such as FaceTime, WhatsApp, Discord, and many others. However, strangely enough, Skype for Business will be unaffected by this closure, leading me to ask one simple question. Who is still using Skype for Business instead of Teams? No joke, me and Sarah are on a Teams call at the moment. This is how we're able to do this podcast like
Yeah.
remotely. Like, who's still using Skype for business instead of Teams at this point in time? I mean, I've used Skype on and off over the years. I remember going to Florida when I was very, very young. We met a family over there who we became lifelong friends with.
Mm.
And when Skype first launched, it allowed us to be able to speak with them over the computer. I remember getting our first webcam and setting that up so that we could like have video calls with them, especially when my mum was ill and
Yeah.
like towards the end of her life, we would set up regular calls with them. I've
Mm.
got lots of like memories of using Skype over the years, but I honestly could not tell you right now when the last time I used Skype itself was. In a business, we use Teams. It's
Yeah.
a brilliant way to allow us to interact, not only through text and call, but sharing documents and things like that as well.
Mm.
Like, it's vastly improved productivity in the workplace. But personally, I will regularly use FaceTime, WhatsApp, Discord for many of my friends in the US. I'm part of a vibrant Disney community where we all interact on Discord. I mean, when's the last time that you can think that you maybe used Skype, Sarah?
I can't remember because I thought it was dead anyway. This is the thing. I'm like, Skype's dead. Is it? No, I thought it died ages ago.
Yeah.
Probably when met my other half. So, um, my other half is German, hence the surname. She says, pointing in the wrong direction of wherever my name is on the screen. And he was working in Germany. He was living in Germany at the time when we first started sort of seeing each other, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So we used to communicate via Skype.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like it's the strangest thing because now when he travels, he works still for the ERP company that I used to work for. When he travels and he goes away, we don't actually speak to each other on the phone.
No.
It's like everybody thinks we're weird, but we just message each other because the sort of like the first probably 7 months of our relationship was all done via text or Skype or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it was actually MSN Messenger when we first started out, and then it moved to Skype,
Yeah,
and then
that kind of moved over to Skype eventually,
yeah,
didn't it?
which is why I'm sort of confused about whether Skype actually was dead or not, because I thought it was just absorbed into Teams and it had just like slowly disappeared and gone off into the sunset, but apparently not. But
Yeah.
yeah, we used that a lot, so that was the mainstay of our communication. I mean, we used to use it in the company anyway
Yeah.
before we started using like Teams and stuff like that. So we actually used it because he was a support analyst in Germany and I was over in the UK. So we would use that to communicate anyhow.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that I'm trying to think, even sort of like COVID time, I think I had a Zoom call with my mum and dad. But not Skype because my mum and dad are in Chesterfield and I'm in Manchester in Trafford. So it's
Ooh.
like at that time, yeah, wrong side of the Pennines. We'll not go there. There has been many
I'm
conversations.
joking. I'm joking.
I've been on this side of the Pennines. I hate to admit this, but I have actually lived here now longer than I lived in Sheffield. So I
Yeah.
was born in Sheffield, stayed there until I was about 14. Then mum and dad moved to Chesterfield, which is not Yorkshire and a weird place. We'll say no more about it. And then I moved back to Sheffield for university and stayed in Sheffield until 1999 and then moved over here. So actually, I have technically lived in Manchester longer than I have
Yeah.
in Sheffield.
Well, you still got a lot of your Yorkshire accent. Not all of it, but
I'm still a Yorkshire lass and I will still argue the toss about the War of the Roses given any opportunity. Yorkshire always win. I don't care what anybody says. I'm rewriting history. But we in that sort of time we used Zoom. So
yeah.
I'm just trying to think. It must have been about 2009,
Wow.
2010.
Yeah.
It's a long time ago. Like I say, I thought it was dead anyway, so it'll be back next week. They'll rebrand it
Yeah.
as something else, won't they?
It'll be fine. It'll be fine. But yeah, as a business, like I say, we use and we even implement Teams for businesses. So
Yeah.
we find it is the best solution to be able to allow businesses to communicate effectively and
Yeah.
be able to work in teams and interact well. And
Well, you look at us. I mean, we literally, if we're not doing this,
yep.
we chat to each other probably twice a day if we've got stuff that needs to be
Oh yeah.
discussed. And it's like, I don't have to drive to Doncaster, although I will, it's
Yeah.
fine. But it's like you literally video call somebody or you message somebody, are you free? Yeah, let's have a chat. It's just part of our lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
It's
I'm
part of
kind
the
of
working
I'm kind of a
environment
bit
now.
sad about Skype kind
Yeah.
of disappearing off into the sunset, maybe, but not really because it's still here.
Yeah. For businesses who still use it.
Yeah. Who maybe we need to know who's still using
Yeah.
Skype
If
because I
you
think
still
that's
use
just
Skype for business, drop me a message because we need to have a chat.
yeah. I need to have a chat. I'm like, why? What is this magic?
Anyway, we're now going to move on to, would you believe it? We've been at this now for over an hour and we're just now moving into the main topic for this week's episode.
Blame Marks and Spencer's for all
It's
this.
Marks
I
and
mean, it's
Spencer's
just
and Co-op's
shocking.
fault. That's what we're blaming. So this week's 24 Tech Tips article is all about digital transformation. You can find it over on the 24 IT Services website. And also we've got links to it out across all of our socials. But digital transformation is not a new thing by any means. It's been a buzzword around businesses for many years. But what many people fail to understand that it isn't just about putting a computer or software in the place of a person and hoping for the best. Digital transformation is about understanding what you would like to improve in your business, where you would like to improve on efficiencies, how digital tools could just generally improve the way that your business operates, for example. As part of this understanding, there are a number of key questions that all businesses should really ask themselves. What are your pain points? Where are your bottlenecks? What are some of your most time-consuming and repetitive or manual tasks? What's important to consider about digital transformation is it isn't just one tool that you implement to fix a problem. It's a holistic approach that ensures that even different departments within a business can work together effectively and efficiently. Another thing to consider is AI's growing role within digital transformation, which goes back to some of the topics that we were talking about earlier. We often hear from businesses, I want to integrate AI into my business, but I don't know how or even where to start. What's important to consider here is that AI is an umbrella term and encompasses a wide range of different topics, from generative AI to analytical AI, automations, machine learning, and a whole lot more beside. I mean, we even implement AI-powered cybersecurity solutions which look for and block suspicious, malicious, and harmful activities on business networks where otherwise you would be looking for a signature. I mean, cybersecurity has changed so much over the last even just few years alone. I mean, back in 2022, I think it was, that there was about 2.39 million cyber attacks on businesses per year. Last year, that increased to 8.58 million businesses. Absolutely massive numbers. So ensuring that businesses have modern cybersecurity tools in place to be able to block these is essential and really important now. You can even now get a computer mouse, not this one, that has an AI button on the side of it, but that doesn't mean that it will work your computer for you. It's just a tool to be able to perform a particular task. Whilst it's important to consider that all these different things as part of AI, I mean, the Adecco Group, for example, recently indicated that businesses could save potentially 1 hour or more of lost productivity per employee per day by implementing AI solutions. Of course, this is depending on the business, depending on the user, depending on the industry. A Gartner study, however, also recently revealed that 30% of generative AI digital transformation projects actually fail because of the poor quality of data, or inadequate risk controls, or escalating costs, or even just an unclear business vision of what they would like to achieve by implementing AI within their business. Many people just believe that they need to use AI because they're keeping up with the Joneses, rather than implementing tools that will have a positive impact by considering the questions that we've spoken about. I mean, Sarah, you've worked now in digital transformation now for, or how many years is it? Would you like to say how many years it is?
Oh, that's a bit cheeky. I was thinking about this today. I have worked around in and around technology for a long time. 30 odd years since
Yeah.
I started at college. So yeah, it's been a while. It's been a while. Um, yeah, but should we say 35
Yeah.
years? Let's just say the words 35 years. I was a child when I started.
And how have you seen digital transformation change in that sort of time period?
Right. This could be potentially controversial.
Oh
We've not got
dear, we're
long.
getting
We've not
there
got all day.
already.
No, I actually genuinely, if you strip digital transformation back to the basics,
Yeah.
I don't think it's changed that much. So in the time that digital transformation as a term came out 2010, 2011, wasn't it? Something like that.
Yeah.
We were doing this stuff before it was a thing. It's kind of like before we had a word for it, we were doing this sort of thing. And if you think about the stages of digital transformation, depending on who you ask on Google, depending on what AI sort of chat you use, you get various different answers to what digital transformation actually is. For me personally, I think about it in three phases basically. So the first one is like bringing computers, for want of a better word, and stuff into your business. So that's the digitization part of digital transformation. That's the first bit. You've then got this middle bit, which is the bit that everybody gets excited about, which is sort of adding extra things onto that. And then you've actually got the final piece, which is where digital sort of like culture is embedded within your business.
Yeah.
Every decision sort of like involves that kind of aspect. And if you actually think about that, we've been doing that for a long time. This is not new. So those steps, I don't think have changed. I think, even back in sort of like the 90s, so when I started my ERP career in 1999, we were still working with businesses who were still starting to put in ERP systems because that was a very new sort of thing back then. Even before then, just computerizing your office, getting a word processor or something like that is still digital transformation. What has changed for me is the technology around that.
Yeah.
So if you think about, God, really showing my age, back at college in 1990, I did miss a year. I didn't miss a year. I messed up my A level, so I started my computer studies ordinary national diploma in 1990, and coded in COBOL. I don't even think people use COBOL anymore, which is a huge language.
I think that it's still used in some sectors and that people who know how to code in it are paid quite well now.
It's massive.
Yeah.
It's massive language. It's not like a little wee language like Pascal or C or whatever they taught you. It's huge. And so we used to code in COBOL, which is the hugest language in the world ever, on 8086 machines that were networked, that you had to, when you sent your stuff to compile, basically you would go down to the common room in Chesterfield College, have a fag, listen to Black Sabbath a few times, then come back up to realise that your compiler failed because you made a mistake in your code somewhere, and then all hell broke loose. But that's how things were. Now, if you look at that now, if you were writing code now, it's completely different. But bringing a computer in, doing the thing, is stage one, and that has always been that. And then the next step is about what you can do to evolve that.
Yeah.
So now we're talking lots about AI and all that kind of stuff, and how we can do process automation. Whereas a bit earlier on in my lifetime, it was probably a business intelligence tool or something like that, Cognos or whatever, that kind of thing. So I think the stuff that we do it with, the equipment, the technology that we use is now nowhere near like it was back then. But I think actually, like I say, the steps are still the same. We're still trying to achieve this sort of, and I put a post on the other day on LinkedIn, this nirvana of digital transformation. But actually, I think a lot of people are still stuck in this middle bit.
Yeah.
Knowing what to do next, because you've got the computer there now. I can't think of any business that's not got a computer or like connected
it's an essential
technology.
utility for businesses nowadays.
Exactly. Most businesses have got various copious bits of technology in there, the next step, and the bit that sort of like scares people in some respects, is this bit in the middle of how do we make this thing better?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where we come in,
Yeah,
for example.
it's about then going back to those questions that we spoke about understanding what a business would like to achieve. Okay, yes, you have computers in place that are helping you to perform particular tasks, but do you feel that some of those tasks could be done easier, more effectively? Are some of them too repetitive? I mean, just think about analyzing, for example, I don't know, sales data. Like, for years and years and years, you would input all of this information into a spreadsheet, and then you would try and graph that and stuff. It's just like, okay, that could be one massive spreadsheet. And I love a good spreadsheet, but that would be a massive spreadsheet.
I'm like recoiling in horror at the thought of a spreadsheet.
For those that haven't heard this story, I planned my wedding with a spreadsheet. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I had a form that I sent out to people that I got meal choices for that fed into another bit that then allowed us to be able to send out to the venue that we had, like, who was sitting where and like what that food was. They still got it wrong. But going back to my earlier point is, when you're putting all of this information in a spreadsheet, if you're able to report on this effectively, just by, let's use Microsoft Copilot as an example again. If a user within your business has access to sales information and they have access to, I don't know, historical data for their particular department, for example, they can ask Microsoft Copilot to be able to report on that rather than spending hours manually going through all of this data, putting it into a spreadsheet, creating graphs and then reporting on it. As long as they have access to that data within their business as part of what we class as PIM and PAM, which is privileged identity and access management, meaning that only people within a business have access to the files and data and resources to perform their jobs effectively. But they can report on that instead of now spending hours on a spreadsheet, spending minutes asking it to be able to produce the right sort of data for them.
I think one of the things that we often forget about digital transformation is it involves people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to the people thing because, I love my people.
We're people at the end of the day, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
We interact with the people of the local business community and people around the world. Now, 16 countries. Yeah. Did you know that? 16 countries we support people in.
From Doncaster?
Yeah. But yes, did not know that. We are obviously a people business. Face.
But I think people, so you look at, Gartner, for example, the stat from Gartner that 30% of Gen AI projects fail. They will fail for all manner of reasons. But having worked in the ERP industry for a good 20 years of my sort of IT tech career, whatever you want to call it, I have spoken to so many people who have had project mishaps, for want of a better word, and I've lived through that. Before I got into my IT career, I worked for a logistics company. We implemented barcode assisted warehousing in the late 90s, which is not unusual because everybody was at it. It's a thing. It wasn't uncommon. The biggest problem that we had was that was a directive that came down from the head office and said, thou shalt implement barcode assisted warehousing on this site. The head of the warehouse was totally against it. All the guys on the shop floor were against it. Yeah. So we implemented it, but by God, that was carnage for the first 6 months because nobody wanted it. No. And there was nothing wrong with the software, the hardware, the network around the building, everything was bob on, latest technology, absolutely perfect. The one thing that broke that was the people. Yeah. And we forget about this. And I say we as a general industry often forget about it because if you don't have the buy-in of the people, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at that project. It doesn't matter how expensive the technology is. You could give everybody the latest and greatest iPad, whatever they wanted. If they don't want to do the thing, if they don't believe in the thing, if they're not kind of involved in the decision-making of the thing that you're implementing.
Or even have the training about it and how it can help them.
And that's the most important thing in all this. You know, people talk about people, processes, and systems. People are the cornerstone of
Yeah,
any digital transformation project, because if they don't believe in it, they won't want to use it. I mean, we've all got examples. I think if we went and asked anybody in the office, have you got an example of where digital transformation has failed? They might look at you a bit funny and then go, and I'm not sure. But then when you drill into it and say, look, you know, has somebody tried to do something with technology and it's gone wrong? The
yeah,
majority of those stories will be about people. And it's either the people on the shop floor, but then the other side of this is that the egos on the other side of the fence. So we talked about the keeping up with the Joneses.
yeah.
You know, just because every other business in your sector in Doncaster has got AI doesn't mean that it's right for you.
No,
You know, it's not going to be for everybody right now. And at the moment, there is this massive scrabble from all of the big sort of ERP companies saying you have to have this thing because this will save you all this money.
yeah,
Well, yes, it could, but if you do it in a way that's not intuitive to your staff, intuitive to your customers, if it doesn't work within the way that you do things, you're spending all that money on basic. It's like the emperor's new clothes, isn't it?
yeah,
It's kind of like we're going to spend all this money on this massive thing and it's not really going to work for us. So it then just gets shoved to one side and people forget about it and talk about it 20 years later in hushed tones because somebody spent all this money on this thing that now is like not working for us. And I think it's that we pay attention to as a business. We talk to people.
yeah.
You know, we get to know people. We get to understand what is happening for them within their business. And that's not necessarily about, you know, what hardware do you need, what software do you need or anything. That's like, what are you doing? What are your growth plans? You know,
Yeah.
what do you want to do in the future?
And that's something that we work with businesses on from day one. So
Mm,
whether it's going out and speaking with a client that we've been working with for 3, 5, or 10
mm,
years, or whether we're going out to speak with a prospective customer, I don't know, this week, for example,
mm,
we work to understand who they are as a business,
mm,
what their pain points are, what's working well
mm.
for them, how they operate even, but
Yeah,
as part of that, what their plans for the future are. I mean,
yeah.
I'll take it back to one of our bigger clients, for example, who only 3 years ago had about 1,700-ish employees.
Mm,
And through supporting them to achieve their growth goals, they're now at like 3,500 or more
yeah,
employees. And
yeah.
that's about understanding them as a business and helping them put the tools and resources and just general systems in place as part of ongoing digital transformation. And
Mm,
that's what's key, is that we've got to
yeah.
remember that digital transformation, whilst you may think of it as a single project right now, it's an ongoing thing within your
Yeah.
business to help improve productivity and improve the way that your business operates to help you achieve your growth goals.
Mm. It's about it being flexible as well, I
Yeah.
think, because it's like, you know, not everybody's business aspiration is to double the workforce.
No.
Some people, their sort of business goal, their whole strategy for the next 12 months might be to improve their customer experience.
Yeah.
So it might be that, you know, we're losing people because of a particular thing.
Yeah.
And that thing could be anything. It could be like you know, it's taking too long to deliver stuff. It could be all manner of different elements of a business that can cause dissatisfaction for their particular customers. And in some cases, on the face of it, say for example, implementing AI in that solution it might be the right answer, but for other businesses it might not.
Yeah.
You know, it might not be that they're ready for that step. And
Yeah.
you need to wind it back a little bit. And we talked a lot earlier, you know, we were talking about Marks and Spencer's, about the volumes of data
Yeah.
that we create as human beings in businesses. There are still a lot of businesses out there who create shed loads, for want of a technical term, shed loads of
Oh,
data,
very
but they
technical
never
term.
actually go back.
Yeah.
They never actually go back and look at it and interrogate it. So for them, it might not be that AI is the answer right now. It might be that they look at a business intelligence tool first, or they look at how they can use the things that they've already got to understand the data better, so that when they come a couple of years down the line, a year down the line, to
Yeah.
look at implementing AI, they've actually got the right data in place. They understand where it's going to work, and then they don't become the 30% that Gartner
Yeah.
talk about.
I mean,
It's a race,
yeah,
but it's like the hare and tortoise, isn't it? We don't all have to run at the same time. Yes, it is important that businesses stay on top of technology to make themselves relevant and keep them, at the head of their game and the best they can be. But that doesn't look identical for everybody.
yeah.
You can't just rock up at a logistics company and say, right, you need this, and then go, 2 miles down the road and go, you need the same thing. No, it doesn't
Every
work like
business is
that.
different. Every business is different. I
Mm,
mean, you speak about things like having historical data and things like
mm,
that and helping businesses. I mean, let's put into I don't know, a manufacturer, for example.
yeah,
If you're a manufacturer of Windows, like, you've probably got data from years and years ago
yeah,
that shows you exactly when your most busiest periods are. That
yeah,
could help you to be able to plan to have stock in at particular times of year, whether it's
mm,
hinges or bolts and screws,
mm,
and making sure that you have the right amount of wood or aluminium and things like that. Like,
mm,
by implementing the right tools to be able to support your business,
mm,
it can help you to plan ahead for your future so that you're not buying stock when you don't need to, or that you're
yeah,
making sure that you're buying plenty of stock when you know that you're going to be needing it.
yeah. And it also helps with I mean, we've got to accept the fact that the current state of the world, supply chains are being disrupted on a regular basis for whatever reason, like whether things getting stuck in the Suez, war, you name it, all these things that we would have never thought of. COVID had
Yeah.
a massive impact, chip shortages, massive impact.
Tariffs
All
even
of these
recently as well in the
yeah, all
US.
these things, there's like a whole list of things that now can impact somebody sourcing a component or, like hinges or whatever it is, whatever piece of the puzzle that they need. If you don't understand fully when your peaks and troughs are in terms of demand, you're not so able to react when there is a supply chain issue.
Yeah.
Because if for example, Windows, we've talked about Windows before, haven't we? When we were talking about what we were going to talk about.
Yeah.
I got my windows replaced at the start of the summer, which
Yeah.
is the peak time for people getting their windows replaced because nobody wants to do windows in December
No.
when it's cold and dark and miserable. So if you're a window company, you know that you've got to have those windows ready. For me, for 2 weeks of my life, when my house was turned upside down and there was more noise than I've ever heard in my life, getting windows out. But those windows need to be ready and done for me because I want my windows fit in this particular
Yeah.
week or 2 weeks. As a manufacturer, that to make those windows, it might take you 5 weeks,
Yeah.
for example, because I've got a lot of windows. So that you need to have all that stuff in place for me, but not just me, for all the other people who live in Trafford who use the window company that I used. You're going to have a peak demand. So
Yeah.
if something happens in your supply chain, you need to know about it. But also, you can have that data about historically what happens in the supply
Yeah.
chain. So it might be that the person that you get your screws from are in the Middle East or
Yeah.
something, or the Far East or whatever, and there are certain events that happen that might impact when they can deliver those. So it's like you've got to balance all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Not only that, but even integrating into their stocking systems as well.
Exactly.
You
I
might
mean,
be able to see how long their current lead time is on things to be able to help adapt how your business is going to order. If
mm,
you know that, oh, this business has now said that their lead time on this product is going to be 3 weeks, we actually need it in 2 weeks. Well, okay, well, we can plan accordingly for that, or we can
yeah.
plan to source from a different supplier, or like you can create alerts based on these sorts of things as well.
I mean, this is one of the beauties, isn't it? And also the dangers of the way that we live now. Because if you think about manufacturing in particular, there's a lot of just in time sort of stuff. So
Yeah,
people don't hold warehouses full of
like
screws,
masses of
stuff,
stock. Yeah,
whatever anymore. They just don't do that because economically it's not viable.
no,
It's like, we order a lot of stuff just in time. I mean, you've only got to look, we go back to the conversation about Amazon.
yeah,
It's like literally, if you want something, you can get it delivered either tonight or tomorrow. So our whole life is just in time, isn't it now? But the problem with that is that if something impacts that, if you're said Windows supplier, how do you deal with that? You either have to source that product from somewhere else, which is potentially more expensive now because it's on a shorter time frame, so the price goes up, or you have to let your customer down and say, actually, Sarah, we promised you we were going to install your Windows the 1st of June, but now we can't do it. Now,
that
in some
happens
cases,
all too often.
Yeah, but it's like me as a consumer now, I'm now more demanding of the people that I purchase things from because we've become used to expecting everything sort of instantly. So you have to have that data in your business to understand where you can move with this. If things go wrong, how can you deal with this? And if you don't interrogate that data, and it might be, back in the day it was a spreadsheet, but it might be like now you use AI to look at, like forecasting and stuff. You need to do this, but it's just how you do it, isn't it? And how you do it that's right for you. I mean, it's not every business is going to be in a position where they can jump straight into AI, like I say, because if they're not even sort of, and I say not even, and I don't mean that like derogatory, because a lot of the time we're just doing the day job, aren't we? But you're not going back and sort of like really drilling into stuff because, like you said, if it's a spreadsheet, that's a time-consuming task. And actually, if it's the choice between making your windows and cracking on with the stuff that needs to be delivered like tomorrow, or going and have a look at what happened last week, you're going to crack on. And it's about picking the right tool for the job, isn't it? Really,
it is. We've talked a lot about AI today in many different contexts, whether it's through digital transformation or in the news, whether it's AI agents or people creating themselves as a Sith Lord. But how do you think that AI will have an impact as part of digital transformation on small to medium businesses and charities even as well?
I think this is the crunch point, isn't it? So I do a lot of work with charities in my spare time. I sort of offer my experience as a marketer, a tech person, and whatever to local charities and things like that. And if you think about the smaller end of the market, so when we talk about SMEs, the smaller end of SMEs, middle sized, not the verging on like big corporates, but the smaller people. They probably have the biggest need for this, but the tightest purse strings. And I think this is the sort of like the sort of like anvil that they're stuck in, isn't it? It's kind of like a lot of information is pushed out into the world from the big ERP vendors, particularly if you're talking about business, manufacturing type businesses and stuff. That's my heritage. So I know this to be true because I'm still involved in that world.
And you've seen it, you've experienced it, and you're seeing how it's...
I've lived it for 30 odd years. AJ, it's far too long.
You brought it up.
I know. I want a badge next time I come on with how old I am, and all that kind of stuff. But if you look at it's kind of like it's aspirational, isn't it? Let's use that sort of term. If you're a business, you look at other businesses and you think, I really want to be like them because they've done this and they've, we see it in case studies across like all sorts of different things all the time. This business put this in and their world changed dramatically and everything was a brilliant sort of place and everybody was happy and smiley on the pictures and all this stuff. But the reality of that is that if you're using a big ERP system, for example, that costs big money. Because the big ERP systems need to obviously make money because that's why they're in business. So if you're at the smaller end of the market, or if you're like a charity, or even, I would even go so far as like micro businesses, there is still a need for this type of technology for AI and stuff, but it's not affordable, or people think it's not affordable. It actually is, if you think about it differently. So we've talked a little bit about Copilot. Copilot, for me, is kind of like a no-brainer because a lot of people have got an Office 365 subscription. It's there. Now, obviously, there are caveats to that. You need to know what you're doing with it. Don't be creating chatbots with it that we've got no control over.
You need to make sure that you have all of the data in the right places, that data is secure. You're following
lots of
policies of least privilege access so that Joe Blogs in sales can't access Melody and accounts as data. You've got to
So,
make sure that the data is there and that it's secure and that it can't be misused. But
massive
that's
caveat.
yeah, but that's why you partner with people such as ourselves to be able to make sure that that due diligence is done and
Yeah.
that AI implementation plans are followed and that you're understanding that you're going to get the most out of it and that you can access the right information when you
Yeah.
need to as well.
I think the thing with Copilot for me personally, I always call it like a gateway drug, and it sounds terrible, but it's like it's the gateway drug to big AI, basically. It's an easy thing. I say easy, and I use that with a lot of caveats around it as well.
Yeah.
But it's something that's more familiar, it's more comfortable. It's not this big mammoth thing
No.
that costs a lot of money to implement, that requires quite a lot of what's the word? I'm going to say thought. It all requires thought, but I think if you're implementing something as part of a bigger picture,
Yeah.
like a big ERP system, there's a lot of consideration that needs to go into that. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of time, all the rest of it. That's not necessarily as agile for the smaller end of the market
No.
as something like Copilot is. And if you look at Copilot, I mean, I am not an expert in interrogating Copilot by any stretch of the imagination. If anybody looks at what I chat to Copilot about, they would be horrified. But we're very polite. I always say please and thank you. But it's an easier thing to implement in a smaller business because you, like I say, you've probably already got the license for it anyway. Most businesses do use Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're both Mac users. I say obviously we're both running Office on a Mac,
Yeah.
which sounds terribly wrong, but we're still doing it and it will work. So it's kind of easy. It you can imagine that. You don't have to spend a
Yeah.
fortune on that.
And a lot
It's
of
kind of like,
just to kind of sidetrack a minute, a lot of people think that, well, why do I need to add Copilot on when I can just use something like ChatGPT or, I don't know, Google Gemini or something like that? And to those people, the problem that you have with that is that by default, something like ChatGPT and Google Gemini, they train themselves on the data that you provide it. They
yeah,
don't have default access to your siloed data within your tenancy of information. Like, if you
yeah,
provide it your historical accounts data, it's going to train itself on your historical accounts data. It
yeah,
will anonymize the data as much as possible, don't get me wrong.
yeah.
But still, it's training itself on that data, and who knows who could potentially report on that as an example within your industry.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important fact that Copilot can sit within your boundaries of your
Yeah.
data. And I think one of the biggest things that people worry about with AI and sort of like stuff like that is what happens if something gets out.
Yeah.
Where as business owners, people are very precious about what goes out into the public, if you think about it. It's like, all back to the Marks and Spencer's thing again. They don't want to share what's gone horribly wrong because that reflects bad on them. And a lot of businesses wouldn't want to share, data around how they're failing 10% of their customers who want their windows fitting, for example. But because it's kind of, you're controlling that. If you look at ERP systems now, big ERP systems, a lot of them are out in the cloud. They're all hosted on like Amazon Web Services hosting, that kind of stuff. And yes, that's tenanted and your data is sort of safe within that environment, but it's still sat out in a bigger sort of place. Whereas if you're somebody who works in a regulated industry and you've got to be really protective about your data, you can actually do that with Copilot and you can tenant it and keep it safe so that there is less risk of that happening. But I think also it's kind of like most people are familiar with Microsoft's sort of like terminology and architecture and how it works and how it sits within their business. So it's not this strange new thing.
No.
It is, but it's not. It's kind of, there's something comfortable about it. And I just think that it's much easier to look at it on a smaller scale like this and make sure that it's right and it works for you in the whole of a stepping stone to go maybe further later.
Yeah.
if your business grows rapidly and you become, sort of like this huge multinational by great fortune and great planning and some great AI work, then yeah, fine, move on to something bigger and more sort of all encompassing. But for the majority of businesses that we particularly work with, this whole big ERP type thing and that kind of architecture is maybe out of reach. And it's about knowing what you can do with the tools that you've got, which is what we've said before. It's like this tool is sat there.
Yeah.
It's relatively straightforward to implement and use. Why would you not?
And this is something
Like
that
that's
businesses do. I mentioned it earlier, but businesses need to consider that when they're planning any form of digital transformation project, whether it's integrating AI, whether it's
mm,
planning automations and machine learning processes and things like that, or even if it's, as we've talked about before, stock management systems and things like that,
yeah.
it's about ensuring that they're regularly assessing, is this working right
Mm,
for their business?
yeah.
Do they need to improve on it more? Have they seen such an improvement now that they need to go to that next level? And by
Yeah.
partnering with someone who understands their business and has regular meetings and just basically checks in, how's it going, sort of thing. I mean,
Mm,
our account managers at the moment are going through quarterly business reviews for all of our customers and seeing, look,
mm,
how are you doing at the moment? Do you have any plans? Is there anything that we can support you in? Or even, I don't know, Windows 10, for example, which goes end of life October 14th of this year. There's
mm,
160 days until Windows 10 becomes end of life, and anyone using old Windows 10 machines will lose feature and security updates that could
yeah.
potentially pose real world threats to their business if attackers were to target them and expose some of the vulnerabilities in the older operating system. Not only that, but Windows 10, when it becomes end of life, will no longer support Microsoft 365 or Office anymore. And
Mm,
businesses who are wanting to use some of these newer AI tools, such as Copilot, will
yeah.
need to look into upgrading. Having these regular reviews and speaking with people who have been going through this and have the knowledge of implementing
Mm.
solutions for businesses on a regular basis is essential.
One of the big things, though, that we've both kind of missed in that is that as a business owner, you don't need to keep up with it because
No?
you're partnering with somebody who does.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of if you think about running a business. So I have my own business that, I work with the charities with. And it's like the things that you have to do as a business owner, there are so many things that you need to
Yeah.
think about. Actually, well, not Windows updates for me. Mac OS updates are probably like the lowest thing down the list ever. Obviously, I do them because,
Good.
I'm not that person, but I do. I promise. As soon as they come up, I do them straight away because, it irritates me that it's telling me that I need to do it. But if you think about if you've got loads of other things to think about, you've got a customer kicking off because something's not happened or this, that, and the other, you have this massive list of things to do. And, the fact that Windows 10 is out of date in 160 days, which I am impressed that you're counting, AJ. I think we got like a countdown
I do
clock
have a
somewhere.
countdown on my screen. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I am not that person, clearly. But it's kind of like having somebody else that takes that sort of thought process away and
Yeah.
comes back to you and says, look, this is what you need to do. This is when you need to do it. Have you got plans in place? It's kind of like that's really important
Yeah.
because running a business, I mean, you just got to ask Mike and Tony, running 24 IT, it's not a simple job.
No.
There's lots of moving parts to
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
actually partnering with somebody who can help you on that journey and take some of that stress away. And also, to be honest, see things maybe differently to you when it
Yeah.
comes to how you implement technology or whatever. That I think is like that's kind of like the priceless bit of it,
Yeah.
isn't it? Really, if you think about it, it's kind of
What's important to consider is that
mm,
we can help businesses because most of the time we've tackled these challenges ourselves. Like we've
yeah,
implemented our own AI solutions to be able to help with supporting businesses. Like, say, for example, if someone calls in or emails in and says, "Oh, I've lost internet," or "Oh, I
mm,
can't print," for example.
Yeah.
Okay, for, I don't know, a vast majority of businesses, not being able to print might not sound like a big thing.
Yeah.
But we've implemented AI solutions within our business that then say, okay, well, actually that business is a logistics business, or they're a warehousing business, or a manufacturing business. Like, not being able to print could vastly impact their business.
Yeah.
And by understanding that these things are important to their business, it allows us to tackle that in a timely manner.
And that's a really good example, isn't it, of a good use of AI.
Yeah.
I know, and this is another tale that I've told AJ many, many, many times. But having worked in a logistics company, having had lorry drivers literally in my face, literally like an inch away from my face, shouting at me because the piece of paperwork that they need to go to Sainsbury's, Tesco's, Waitrose, other supermarkets are available,
Yeah.
to deliver their items on time, because this was at a time when time delivery slots were happening for a lot of the supermarkets.
Yeah.
This was a new thing that came in. If that piece of paper isn't in that lorry with that driver and he turns up at the supermarket depot, they will refuse his lorry load. And that, you know, I don't know whether they did, but it might be a 3 strikes and you're out kind of thing. It might be that you no longer supply Sainsbury's with their butties, or Marks and Spencer's, going back to the meal deal thing. But, you know, it's kind of like that is actually a business showstopper.
Yeah.
That one piece of paper for that one particular load is an important thing. So actually having an AI bot that understands that and knows that if this customer logs this particular sort of issue that actually is business critical for them, that allows that to be escalated to the right person straight away, instead of it sitting on a queue and, you know, other things will, having been there on a support desk where things come in order of priority, if that's mislogged at the wrong priority, it will sit there until, you know, somebody's available to look at it. That time might mean the loss of a contract.
Yeah.
It boils down to that, doesn't it? It literally is that cold-hearted in some respects, that it will boil down to that particular client losing something. And that's where we need to be at, isn't it? We need to stop that from happening.
Yeah. Well, what a meaty discussion topic for today.
Don't like dropping us in at the deep end, is there?
No, there isn't. But what's important to consider is that we wanted to make sure that we brought you on for this first episode of The Download, is because that we're doing a lot around digital transformation at the moment. In fact, the whole reason that we brought Sarah in, Sarah actually had worked with us over the years. In fact, you used to actually do some consulting for us back before I started, I think it was, wasn't it, Sarah? Yes. And we've stayed in touch over the years and stuff like that. But you, of course, have a lot of experience with digital transformation and in fields of logistics, manufacturing, warehousing, and a whole host of other things across the IT and tech space as well. You've come in, of course, as I mentioned earlier, as our client AI implementation officer. And this is part of what we're doing at the moment, where we're putting on some AI roadshows, well, around digital transformation and AI and supporting businesses, much as we've spoken about today, to be able to help them plan these sorts of projects effectively and affect positive change within their businesses. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, the events, the idea of the events is that it's a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that's really important to get across. So these events are not us standing there telling you what to do. It's going to be a two-way process.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we're obviously starting off on our home turf. I'm moving around the country. I am going to be reaching out to a lot of businesses, hopefully soon.
Yeah.
To have conversations about, you know, what they would like to see. But the idea of these events is it's very much, I want to reiterate that it's conversation. It's not us preaching.
No, it's educational as well.
Yeah, it's about what you can do, but what that actually means to you as a business. It's not what it means to us. It's not how we think you should do it. It's kind of like, what do you need? Where do you think the gaps are? And then we have a conversation. We educate people about it. We educate each other.
Yeah.
Because I think as much as, you know, we are the experts in this kind of field, the people who come to these events are experts in their business, and
Yeah.
we need to kind of have that two-way conversation. I'm really looking forward to it because I've been on sort of like on the peripheries of this for a while, I suppose. In recent years, I've been working as a marketing manager, but I've always loved this kind of tech human interaction kind of piece. I've always really enjoyed finding out more about people. Ultimately, inherently, I am a nosy person. I want to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what keeps you awake at night. Because like we've said throughout this conversation today, in some respects, the technology is incidental.
Yeah.
It's the people, it's what you do, how you do it, what makes you unique as a business, and that's what we as a business, we as 24 IT are interested in. It's like, why are you unique? What can we do to help you move this business forward? Because we all want to see everybody succeed. And it's like, particularly in as a Yorkshire lass, particularly in the South Yorkshire region, it's kind of like my home turf. And I think they're going to be there's going to be food involved, isn't there? We've said
Free
we're going to do
breakfast. Anyone who comes
breakfast.
along, free breakfast and tea and coffee.
I was going to say, as
So
long as there's caffeine, I'm there. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not even that bothered about food. I just want coffee. But I think it's about there's a big thing about it being a collaborative sort of thing. I'm gonna keep pushing this point
Yeah.
till the cows come home, because business can feel a really lonely place, can't it? If
It
you're a
can.
business owner, you feel like you're the only person having this sort of nightmare about how to implement AI, for example. Actually, you're probably not. And by getting a bunch of people together, we can have those conversations.
Yeah.
We can talk to each other. The fact that we're doing this and getting like different people on every week to talk about different sort of things is the start of this process. It's about that kind of, how do we bring people together? How do we build a community around this? Because by doing it as a group effort, it makes it so much easier. And
Yeah.
I don't know why businesses don't do it half the time. It really surprises me that like a lot of businesses are quite parochial, aren't they? And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is my thing and I'm doing it. When actually, you've only got to look at like businesses that work together as part of the Doncaster Chamber, for example, or the Sheffield Chambers of
Yeah.
Commerce and stuff, how much growth there is when people choose to work together.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm on that bandwagon. I want to talk to everybody about AI, why they love it, why they hate it. So if you get a connection request from me and I start chatting about AI,
That's why.
this is me basically.
And if you're interested in potentially coming to one of these AI road shows, just feel free to drop me or Sarah a message. Like, drop us a message, just say, look, the first one, actually, for those who are interested, is going to be on the 26th of June. We were going to look at doing one sooner, however, due to unforeseen circumstances, we've decided to move that now. So the first one will be on the 26th of June. So if you're interested in coming along, like I say, there is free breakfast and caffeine involved. Drop me or Sarah a message. Otherwise, Sarah will be in contact with some people over the coming weeks to send out some invites as well. So thank you very much, Sarah, for joining me on the show today. Usually, when we have a member of the local business community on, now would be the opportunity where they would get the chance to talk about who they are, what their business is, what they're doing across the local region at the moment. However, of course, today with Sarah being on board and us talking about digital transformation, which is kind of Sarah's kind of wheelhouse, let's say,
Yeah.
we've decided to forgo the part of discussing the guest in more detail in their business because Sarah's a part of our business.
Yeah, there's not much more to say, really, is there? I mean, I can go on about this stuff for quite some time, as you well know, AJ, but we'll save that for another one. I might come
Yeah.
back. It might be a
Oh, you're
return
always
visit.
welcome, Sarah. You're always welcome. But next week, we will be back with Rob Smith, actually, from Andy's Man Club, where we'll be
Oh, that's going to
talking
be a good one.
about, oh, yeah, we're going to be talking about accessibility in the workplace, mental health, and a whole lot more. It'll be interesting to see whether the M&S cyber incident is still ongoing and if there's been any further developments with either the Co-op one or the Harrods one as well. So be sure to tune in for that. Of course, if you didn't catch the start of the show today, we have now been going for, we've been going for an hour and 3/4. I did not realize that it had taken that long, but if you have tuned in for just part of the show today, maybe you're just catching the end of it, or maybe you only caught the start of it. If so, how are you listening to this at the moment? We are going to have this available as video on demand through LinkedIn, through YouTube, and also it will be uploaded to places like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and places like that as well. So be sure to check that out if you want to listen in or watch the full show. Hopefully, everyone has a fantastic day. If you are a member of Doncaster Chamber, I am going to be out networking with them tomorrow morning, I believe. There is a networking event. Other than that, hopefully you all have a fantastic day. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us, and we hope to speak to you all very soon.